The house didn't look like mine when I walked in. Not wrong, just shifted. Furniture moved, shelves cleared and reset. Even the hallway felt different somehow. Claire stood in the kitchen, watching me take it in. I needed a change, she said. I nodded. It looked good. Cleaner, lighter. I set my bag down, walked through each room slowly, noticing what had moved and what hadn't. Nothing fell out of place. Just not where I left it. I thought that was the only thing that had changed. Then I got to the end of the hall. The small room we never really used. More storage than anything else. The door was closed. I reached for the handle, turned it. It didn't move. Locked. I stood there for a second, then tried again. Same result. That should have been nothing. Just a door. It wasn't. I turned back toward the kitchen. Hey, I said. Why is this locked? Claire didn't answer right away. She dried her hands on a towel, then looked at me. I'll explain later, she said. I waited a second. Later tonight? I asked. She hesitated. Just later, she said. I thought that would be a quick conversation. Something simple. A reason a key done. It wasn't. That door stayed closed the entire night. And somehow, that made the rest of the house feel different too. Claire and I have been married 6 years. Long enough that things settled into a rhythm. Not perfect, not strained. Just lived in. We knew how to move around each other. When to talk, when not to. What needed to be said out loud and what didn't. I traveled for work more than I used to. Not constantly, but often enough that being gone for a week didn't feel unusual. That last trip was the same as any other. Flight out early Monday. Meetings stacked close together. Evenings that ended with quick calls instead of long ones. Claire handled that well. She always had. Independent, steady, comfortable on her own. That was something I'd always respected about her. I never had to check in too much. Never had to wonder how she was managing things while I was gone. She just did. We texted during the day. Short updates. Made it to the hotel. Meeting ran long. Picked up groceries. At night, we talked for a few minutes. Nothing heavy, just enough to stay connected. How was your day? Busy. Same here. That was normal. There was nothing in those calls that stood out. No hesitation. No shift in tone. If anything, it felt easier. Clean, predictable. I thought this was just another week. It was. Right up until I got back. The first thing I noticed wasn't the locked door. It was the air. Not literally. Just the feeling of walking into a space that had been changed without you being there to see it happen. I set my bag down near the entryway and looked around slowly. The couch had been moved, turned slightly, opening up the room. A shelf I didn't remember noticing before was now against the opposite wall. A couple things were gone entirely. Not missing, just removed. Claire stood near the kitchen, watching me take it in. I needed a change, she said. Her voice was even. Not defensive, not overly casual either. Just stating it. Looks good, I said. And it did. There was nothing wrong with it. If anything, it felt more intentional than before. Cleaner. I walked through the living room, running my hand lightly along the back of the couch as I passed. Then into the kitchen. A few things had shifted there too. Small changes. Utensils in different drawers. Coffee mugs arranged differently. I opened one cabinet, then closed it again without taking anything out. That should have been enough. People rearrange things. It happens. I thought this would feel like coming home. It didn't. Not fully. I picked up a glass from the counter, poured some water, took a sip. Claire moved around me easily. Like everything was already settled. Dinner's in the fridge, she said. Just needs to be heated. Okay, I replied. We moved through the next few minutes without anything unusual. I unpacked part of my bag, set my laptop on the table, checked a couple messages I'd ignored during the flight. Normal. All of it. Then I walked down the hallway. Not for any specific reason. Just moving through the house. Relearning it. Maybe. The bedroom was the same. Mostly. A few things adjusted, but nothing that stood out. Bathroom. Same thing. Then I reached the end of the hall. That small room. We never really used it for anything important. Storage mostly. Boxes, old papers, things that didn't have a place anywhere else. The door was closed. I didn't think about it at first. Just reached for the handle, turned it. It didn't move. Locked. I tried again, a little slower this time. Same result. That was new. We didn't lock doors in the house. Not like that. I stood there for a second, hand still on the handle. I thought this would feel like nothing. Just a detail. It didn't. It sat there. Not heavy. Just out of place. I turned, walked back toward the kitchen. Claire was at the counter, rinsing something in the sink. "Hey," I said. "That room's locked." She didn't turn right away. Just finished what she was doing, dried her hands. Then looked at me. "I know," she said. "What?" I asked. She paused. Not long. Just enough that it registered. "I'll explain later," she said. I leaned slightly against the counter. "Later tonight?" I asked. She hesitated again. "Just later," she said. That should have been enough. A simple answer. A delay. Nothing more. It wasn't. It didn't close anything. It just moved it. I nodded once. "Okay," I said. We went back to normal after that. Or at least something that looked like it. We ate dinner. Talked about the trip. About things that needed to get done that week. Nothing in her tone suggested anything was wrong. Nothing in mine either. But the room stayed in the back of my mind. Not pressing. Just there. At one point, I glanced down the hallway again. Couldn't see the door from where I was sitting, but I knew exactly where it was. That should have faded as the evening went on. It didn't. It stayed the same. Unanswered. And the longer it stayed that way, the less it felt like a small thing. I thought this would come up naturally. A moment where she'd bring it up, explain it, hand me the key. It didn't. We went to bed without mentioning it again. No tension. No argument. Just the same routine we'd always had. Except for one thing that hadn't been there before. A door that stayed closed. And a conversation that didn't happen. That was the incident. Not the lock itself. The delay behind it. Because once something needs to be explained later, it's already become something else. And whatever it is, it doesn't stay small for long. The next morning felt normal. Coffee, quick conversation, both of us moving through the routine without needing to think about it. Claire stood by the counter, scrolling through something on her phone while the kettle heated. "Meeting today?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. "Couple of them." She nodded. "Same here." Nothing in her tone suggested anything had changed. If you removed the locked door, there wouldn't have been anything to question. I poured coffee into a mug, took a sip, set it down. I thought about bringing it up again. Not pushing, just asking. Then didn't. Not because I forgot. Because I wanted to see if she would. She didn't. That should have told me something. It didn't yet. I left for work, came back later that evening. The house felt the same as it had the night before. Rearranged but settled, like it had already adjusted to its new shape. Claire was on the couch when I walked in. Laptop open. Something paused on the screen. "Hey," she said. "Hey." I set my bag down, loosened my tie, walked into the kitchen. Same layout as the day before. Nothing new. I opened the fridge, looked inside, then closed it again without taking anything. Then I walked down the hallway. Same path as the night before. The door was still closed. I stopped in front of it, didn't reach for the handle this time. Just stood there for a second. That should have felt like overthinking. It didn't. It felt like checking something that hadn't moved. I turned, walked back to the living room. "Hey," I said. Claire looked up. "Yeah." "That room's still locked," I said. She held my gaze for a second. "I know," she replied. "Are you going to tell me what's going on with it?" I asked. My tone stayed even. No edge to it. Just a question. She shifted slightly on the couch, closing her laptop halfway. "I just need a little more time," she said. That was new. Not the delay. The wording. A little more time. "For what?" I asked. She paused. Not long. Just enough that it stayed in the space between us. "I'll explain," she said. Not yet." I nodded once. Okay, that should have been enough. Same as the night before. But it wasn't the same now. There was something underneath it. Not tension exactly. Just distance. I sat down across from her, picking up the remote, turning the volume down on whatever had been playing. "What kind of time?" I asked. She exhaled lightly. Just a few days, she said. I watched her for a second, not try to read into it, just observing. All right, I said. We moved on after that. Dinner, conversation, the same flow as before. But something had shifted, not in what we were saying, in what wasn't being said. Over the next couple of days, I didn't bring it up again immediately. I let it sit, not ignoring it, just seeing what would happen if I didn't push it forward. Claire acted the same on the surface. Work, routine, small conversations. But there were small things that didn't line up the way they usually did. Her phone stayed face down more often. Not hidden, just placed that way. When notifications came in, she'd glance at the screen quickly, then move on. No urgency, but also no openness about it. That was new. At dinner one night, her phone buzzed twice in a row. She didn't check it right away, just kept eating like it didn't matter. Then, a few minutes later, she picked it up, looked at it, and put it back down without saying anything. That should have felt normal. People get messages. It didn't. It felt selective. I didn't ask about it. Didn't reach for her phone. Didn't try to connect it to anything else. Because I didn't need to. It wasn't about what was on the phone. It was about what she wasn't sharing. That was the pattern. Not just the locked room. The delay. The gaps. The way information was being held back in small, consistent ways. I thought this would feel like suspicion. It didn't. It felt like awareness. There's a difference. Suspicion looks for something to confirm a fear. Awareness just notices what's already there. By the third day, the room was still locked. Nothing had changed. No explanation. No key. No shift in tone from her about it. I stood in the kitchen that evening, pouring water into a glass, watching the level rise. Then set it down on the counter without drinking it. Hey, I said. She turned from the sink. Yeah. It's been a few days, I said. That room. She nodded once. I know. You said you needed time. I added. I did, she said. And now? I asked. She looked at me for a second, not avoiding it, just holding the space. I still do, she said. That was different. No softening. No adjustment. Just the same answer, extended. I thought that would frustrate me. It didn't. It clarified things. That was the shift. Whatever was behind that door wasn't small. If it were, it would have been explained already. People don't delay simple things. They delay things that change something. I nodded once. Okay, I said. We didn't talk about it again that night. But from that point on, it wasn't just a question sitting in the background. It had weight. Not because I imagined something worse, because the pattern around it had become consistent. And once something becomes consistent, you don't need to guess anymore. You just wait to see how it resolves. The next morning, I came into the kitchen and saw something new. A key, sitting on the counter. No note, no explanation, just placed there. That should have felt like an answer. It didn't. It felt like a decision. And whatever that decision was, it had already been made before I picked it up. I stood there for a second, looking at the key. Didn't pick it up right away. Just let it sit where it was on the counter, like it had been placed carefully enough to be noticed but not explained. That should have felt like relief. It didn't. It felt like timing. I reached out, picked it up, turned it once between my fingers. It was small, plain. Nothing about it suggested anything important. I set it back down, poured myself coffee, took a sip, then leaned against the counter. Claire had already left for work. No message, no follow-up, just the key. I thought this would feel like an invitation, like she was ready to talk. It didn't. It felt like she had already said what she needed to say without saying it. I finished my coffee, rinsed the mug, and set it in the sink. Then I picked the key up again and walked down the hallway. The house was quiet. No movement, no sound beyond the floor, shifting slightly under my steps. I stopped in front of the door, same as the last few days. Closed. Still, I didn't hesitate. Just put the key in the lock and turned it. It clicked easily. No resistance. That part felt practiced. I opened the door slowly. The room didn't look like storage anymore. That was the first thing. It was clean, organized, everything placed with intention. Boxes stacked along one wall. Not randomly, not forgotten. Labeled. I stepped inside, closing the door behind me without thinking. The air felt still. Not unused. Just quiet. I looked around slowly. There were things I recognized immediately. Old photographs. Albums I hadn't opened in years. A box with documents. Folders I hadn't seen since before we were married. Clothes I hadn't worn in a long time. Not because I didn't want them, because they had disappeared into storage somewhere along the way. All of it here. Arranged. Not packed away. Not hidden. Prepared. That was the word that landed. Prepared. I walked over to one of the boxes, crouched slightly, read the label. My name, written clearly in her handwriting. Not rushed. Not temporary. Final. I thought this would feel like anger. Like something had been taken from me, moved without asking. It didn't. It felt like something had been separated. Carefully. Deliberately. I stood up slowly, looking around the room again. Every piece of it told the same thing. This wasn't cleaning. Wasn't organizing for space. This was sorting. My things. Not ours. Mine. I sat down on the edge of a chair she must have brought in. Didn't touch anything. Just sat there. I thought about the week I had been away. How normal it had felt. How nothing in our conversations had hinted at anything like this. And then I thought about the last few days. The delay. The later. The time she needed. It all fit now. Not loosely. Exactly. I thought this would feel like something breaking. It didn't. It felt like something already broken being acknowledged for the first time. That was worse. Because there wasn't anything to react to. No sudden moment. Just a line that had been there longer than I had seen. I stayed there for a while. Long enough that the room stopped feeling unfamiliar. It just became clear. I didn't need to open anything. Didn't need to check the details. The structure was already obvious. Everything in this room was ready to be moved. Not packed in a hurry. Not thrown together. Considered. That's what stayed with me. Not what was in a room. The care it had taken to get it there. I stood up, walked to the door, opened it, and stepped back into the hallway. Closed it behind me. Locked it again. Then placed the key on the small table by the wall. Not back in the kitchen. Here. Closer to where it belonged. I went into the kitchen, sat down at the table, and waited. Didn't check the time. Didn't distract myself. Just sat there, hands resting flat on the surface. I thought this would turn into something immediate. A call, maybe. A message asking what this meant. It didn't. I already knew what it meant. What I didn't know was how long it had been forming. That was the only question left. When Claire got home, I didn't move. I heard the door open. Her keys set down. The slight shift in her steps as she came into the kitchen. She saw me at the table and stopped. "Hey," she said. "Hey," I replied. She looked at me for a second, then at the hallway, then back at me. "You opened it," she said. "I did," I replied. She didn't ask what I thought. Didn't try to explain it right away. Just stood there waiting. I gestured lightly to the chair across from me. "Sit," I said. She did. Slowly. Carefully. I looked at her for a moment, not searching for anything, just seeing her clearly. Then I asked the only thing that mattered. "How long have you been planning this?" That was it. Not what. Not why. How long? Because once something reaches that level of preparation, it didn't start recently. And whatever the answer was, it would explain everything else that had come before it. She didn't answer right away. Not because she didn't understand the question, because she was deciding how to answer it. I watched her sit there, hands folded lightly in front of her, eyes not avoiding mine, but not fully holding them either. That was new. Claire usually answered quickly, even when the answer wasn't simple. "I don't know," she said finally. I nodded once. "You don't know how long," I said. She shook her head slightly. "I don't know when it started becoming real," she replied. I leaned back in my chair a little, letting that sit. That should have sounded vague. It didn't. It sounded careful. "What does that mean?" I asked. She exhaled slowly. "I wasn't planning it," she said. "Not at first." I didn't interrupt. She looked down at the table for a second, then back up. "I started going through things while you were away," she continued. Just cleaning, organizing. I thought it would help me feel better. About what? I asked. She paused again. Longer this time. That's the part one hadn't said out loud yet, she said. I didn't move. Didn't fill the silence. I've been unhappy, she added. Not dramatic. Not heavy. Just stated. That should have felt like a shock. It didn't. It felt like something that had been present in smaller ways, just never named directly. For how long? I asked. She hesitated. I don't know exactly, she said. A while. I nodded slightly. That matched the room. Not sudden. Not reactive. Built over time. So the room, I said. That was part of figuring that out. She looked at me, then nodded once. I didn't go in there thinking I was going to separate your things, she said. It just started happening. How? I asked. She glanced toward the hallway for a second. I picked up a box, she said. Then another one. Things that were clearly yours, things that weren't really part of us anymore. She stopped. Not because she was finished, because she was choosing the next part. And once I started, I didn't stop, she added. I rested my hands on the table, fingers still. That's not something you do halfway, I said. No, she replied. That landed. Clean. I needed to see it, she said. All in one place. See what? I asked. She met my eyes directly this time. What would feel like if you weren't here? That should have hit harder. It didn't. It clarified everything at once. I thought this would feel like rejection. It didn't. It felt like honesty that had arrived late. I nodded once. Did it help? I asked. She didn't answer immediately. That hesitation mattered. I don't know, she said. That was the first time something didn't align cleanly. Everything else had been direct. This wasn't. So you went through all of that, I said. Set up like that, and you still don't know? She shook her head slightly. I thought I would, she said. I thought once I saw it, it would be obvious. And it wasn't, I said. No, she replied. I leaned back again, letting the chair settle. That was the moment it shifted. Not when I opened the room. Not when she said she'd been unhappy. Here, where the decision still hadn't been made. I thought this would feel like something I needed to fix. It didn't. It felt like something I needed to define. There's a difference. Fixing keeps things open. Definition closes the space where uncertainty sits. I looked at her for a second, then spoke clearly. I can't live in a house where that question is still open, I said. She didn't react right away, just absorbed it. I'm not asking you to decide quickly, I continued. I'm asking you to decide. She nodded slowly. I know, she said. That room, I added. That's not a small thing. I know, she repeated. We sat there for a moment. No movement, no attempt to soften anything. I thought this would turn into something emotional. It didn't. It stayed direct. That was the pattern of the conversation. No raised voices. No deflection. Just placement. Have you decided now? I asked. She looked at me, then away, then back again. No, she said. That was the answer. Not uncertain. Just incomplete. I nodded once. Then I need you to, I said. She didn't push back. Didn't argue. She understood what that meant. Not as pressure, as structure. I can't stay in this if you're still deciding whether you want to be in it. I added. I know, she said again. That was the line. Not spoken as a threat. Not framed as an ultimatum. Just the reality of it. I stood up slowly, pushing the chair back slightly with my leg. Walked to the counter, picked up a glass, poured water. Took a sip, set it down. Behind me, she hadn't moved. I thought this would feel like something ending. It didn't. It felt like something finally being made clear enough to move forward. Whether that movement was together or apart. That part wasn't decided yet. But the space where uncertainty had been allowed to sit without consequence. That was gone. And once that was gone, everything else had to follow it. One way or another. There wasn't any version of this that stayed the same after that conversation. And we both knew it, even without saying it out loud. The next 2 weeks didn't feel like a countdown. There was no deadline written down. No date where something had to be decided. But everything moved with that awareness underneath it. Every conversation mattered. Every silence did too. We didn't argue. That was the first thing. No raised voices. No attempts to win anything. Just talking. More directly than we had in a long time. Sometimes at the table. Sometimes late at night, sitting on opposite ends of the couch. Different settings, same tone. Honest. Uncomfortable in places. But clear. She talked about when things started to feel off. Not one moment. Not one event. Just a slow shift. How small frustrations stopped being spoken. How distance didn't get addressed because it didn't feel urgent. I thought it was normal, she said one night. That it would just settle back. I nodded. I did too, I said. That was the part we both recognized. Not neglect. Just assumption. That would have been stable would stay that way without effort. It doesn't. Not like that. I told her what I had noticed. Not accusations. Just observations. How we stopped asking real questions, I said. How things became more about managing the day than actually checking in. She didn't argue. Didn't defend it. She just listened. That mattered. There were moments where it could have turned. Where one of us could have shifted into blame. Into pointing out who had done less. Who had pulled away first. We didn't. Not because we avoided it. Because it didn't change anything. The room still existed. The decision still hadn't been made. That was the center of it. Everything else circled around that. One night, sitting at the table again, I asked her directly, "Have you decided?" She didn't answer right away. That pause had become familiar. But this one felt different. Not searching, not uncertain, just measured. "Yes," she said. I stayed still. "Okay," I replied. She looked at me. "I want to try," she said. Not quickly. Not like she needed to convince me. Just stated. I thought that would feel like relief. It didn't. Not immediately. It felt like something real. Which is heavier? Try how? I asked. She leaned forward slightly, resting her hands on the table. Differently, she said. Not like we've been doing it. That's vague, I said. I know, she replied. But I don't have a cleaner version of it yet. I nodded once. That was honest. And honesty had been consistent up to that point. I'm not going to guess what that means, I said. I need to hear it clearly. She exhaled slowly. Actually talking about things before they build up, she said. Not avoiding it just because it feels easier in the moment. I watched her for a second. In the room, I said. She glanced toward the hallway briefly. I shouldn't have done that without telling you, she said. But I'm not going to pretend it didn't matter. That's not what I'm asking, I said. She looked back at me. I needed to know if I could picture things without you, she said. That's what it was. And now? I asked. Now I can picture both, she replied. And I'm choosing this one. That was the answer. Not emotional. Not softened. Clear. I thought that would make everything easier. It didn't. Because choosing to stay isn't the same as fixing what led to leaving. That still had to be dealt with. I'm not going to convince you, I said. She nodded. I'm not asking you to, she replied. And I'm not going to perform effort just to prove something, I added. If we're doing this, it has to be real. I know, she said. We sat there for a moment. No tension, no urgency, just understanding what had been said. That was the reversal, not her deciding to stay. Both of us agreeing on what staying actually meant. Not comfort, not returning to what it had been. Something new, or nothing at all. Over the next few days, things didn't suddenly improve. They didn't fall apart either. They just shifted. Conversation stayed open. Questions got asked earlier. Smaller things didn't get pushed aside. That should have felt like progress. It did, but it was measured, not dramatic. We didn't celebrate it, didn't frame it as success. We just kept moving through it. The room stayed closed during that time. Not locked anymore, but not used. Just there. I didn't go back into it. Didn't need to. What represented had already been addressed. One evening, she stood in the hallway, looking at the door, then turned to me. I'll move everything back, she said. I nodded. Okay. No discussion. No emotion attached to it. Just action. That was the payoff. Not that the room existed. That it didn't need to anymore. The decision had been made. And now everything else had to follow it. Not perfectly. Not immediately. But consistently, that was the only way it would hold. And we both knew that, without needing to say it again. We started counseling about a month later. Not immediately, not in the emotional aftershock of everything. By then, the room had already been emptied back into the house. My things were where they had been before, more or less. Books back on shelves, folders back in drawers, old photographs tucked away again where they used to be. If someone walked in at that point, they wouldn't have known anything had happened. That should have made it easier to forget. It didn't, but it helped us stop pretending that putting things back meant everything had returned with them. That was the difference. We weren't trying to erase the moment. We were trying to understand what had made it possible. Counseling was uncomfortable in a way I hadn't expected. Not because of conflict, because of precision. You sit in a room with someone asking simple questions, and suddenly you realize how many things in a marriage get managed instead of spoken. Small disappointments, assumptions, the lazy kind of patience that isn't really patience at all, just delay. Claire was better at saying things directly by then. That changed first, not softer, clearer. If something felt off, she said it earlier. If she was frustrated, she said it while it was still small enough to talk about honestly. I had my part in it too. I'm not the kind of person who creates drama. Never have been. I used to think that made me easy to live with. Sometimes it does. Sometimes it just makes you harder to reach. That was one of the things I had to hear clearly. I could be present without being open, helpful without really engaging. In the room, but slightly withheld. Not in some cruel way, just enough that a marriage could start thinning out without anything obvious breaking. That should have bothered me more to admit. It did eventually, just not all at once. That was the thing about the whole period after the locked room. Nothing changed in one grand, satisfying burst. It changed through repetition. Hard conversations that kept happening. Questions we answered honestly, even when the answers made us both look worse than we preferred. The first year was the hardest. Not because we were close to ending it every day. Because we weren't. That would have been simpler. What made it hard was the quieter work of not sliding back into the version of ourselves that had created the problem in the first place. You can survive one terrible conversation if you have to. What takes more out of you is choosing, over and over, not to retreat into the easier version of the relationship. The one where things stay polite, manageable, half-spoken. We got better at catching that. One of us would start to drift into it, and the other would stop the conversation. Not harshly, just enough. No, say the real part, Claire said to me once in the kitchen. I remember that because I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because she was right. I had started explaining something in that clean, reasonable way I use when I don't want to admit I'm actually hurt. She heard it immediately, and instead of letting me hide inside it, she stopped me. That was new. And I did the same for her when I needed to. Not perfectly, not gracefully every time, but consistently. That was the part that mattered. About 2 years passed. Not quickly, but cleanly. Long enough that the locked room stopped feeling like a recent event and started feeling like a line we had crossed and kept walking beyond. The marriage now is better. I don't mean calmer or easier. I mean real. There's a difference. Easier can still be empty. Calm can still be avoidance. This is better because there's less performance in it. Less guessing. If something is wrong, it gets said. If something matters, it doesn't wait until it is turned into furniture being moved and doors being locked. That was the cost of learning it this way. Higher than I would have chosen. Still worth paying, apparently. I thought I'd hate that memory forever. Coming home. The changed house. The key on the counter. That room. I don't. That surprised me more than anything. I don't look back on it fondly. It wasn't noble or beautiful while it was happening. It was awful in a very controlled, adult way, which is its own kind of awful. But I don't hate it, because it forced something into the open that had been living half-formed between us for too long. And once it was open, we had to either deal with it honestly or lose everything while pretending we hadn't. That should have been the end of us. It wasn't. That was the moment I expected everything to fall apart. It wasn't. One afternoon, maybe a year into counseling, I found a key in a drawer. Same small one. Plain, forgettable. I picked it up, looked at it for a second, then set it on the dresser instead of putting it back. Claire saw it later that evening. Didn't say anything at first. Then she looked at me and said, "You can throw that away if you want." I shook my head. "No," I said. "I'm keeping it." She paused. "Why?" she asked. I picked it up again, turning it once between my fingers. "Because I don't want to forget what it cost us to finally be honest," I said. She nodded once. No argument. No discomfort. Just understanding. So I kept it. Not on display. Not somewhere dramatic. Just in a place I see every now and then. A drawer. A shelf. The kind of spot where ordinary things live until they quietly remind you of something. It isn't a warning. That's the important part. I'm not keeping it because I'm waiting for another locked room, or because I think trust is fragile in the same way now. It isn't. I keep it because some truths only become useful after they hurt you first. And once they do, you don't always want to lose the shape of what they taught you. Claire and I still have ordinary days. Work, bills, errands, dinner, small irritations, tired evenings. All the normal texture is still there. Maybe more than ever. But now it feels like two people actually in the same place while they're living it. Not one person guessing and the other delaying. Not both of us hoping the parts we weren't saying would somehow solve themselves. That hope is expensive. We learned that. I used to think the scariest thing in a marriage would be a fight. A betrayal you could point to. Something loud enough to justify whatever came next. Sometimes it's quieter than that. Sometimes it's a locked door at the end of a hallway and a person you love saying, "I'll explain later," because they still don't know if they're staying. And somehow, if both people are honest enough after that, it doesn't always end there. Some things don't survive the truth. Ours did, barely at first, then fully. And that's why I kept the key. Not because I'm afraid of what almost happened, because I respect what honesty finally gave back. I still think about that week sometimes, not in a haunted way. More like checking an old scar and realizing it healed stronger than you expected. If stories like this stay with you, where silence ends is where I keep telling them. And I'm curious, if someone handed you the truth that late, would you still want to rebuild, or would you walk away?